It's a story we hear constantly in the clinic. Someone hits their mid-40s and tries that same aggressive crash diet that worked back in college. But this time, not only does it fail, they actually end up heavier than when they started. It's incredibly frustrating.
Right, and it feels like a total betrayal, but it's actually just biology. It's so interesting how that rebound happens, because we've been taught to view the body like a simple calculator. But at this stage, it's really more of a survival machine. When you slash those calories, you aren't just burning fat. You're pulling a metabolic fire alarm that the body takes very, very seriously.
It's so powerful when you realize that our bodies aren't actually trying to sabotage us. If you look at our evolutionary programming, rapid weight loss never meant getting fit. It meant a famine was coming.
Right, exactly. And it's so interesting how that rebound effect intensifies after 40. Historically, older tribe members needed those extra reserves to survive illness. So when you drop down to 1,200 calories, your hypothalamus basically perceives a crisis. It shifts from growth mode into protection mode. It's not a defect in your metabolism. It's actually this incredibly sophisticated safety system doing exactly what it was designed to do.
Let's dive into what I'd call the first major hormonal casualty here, cortisol. It's fascinating because in your 20s, your body can usually bounce back from those spikes. But once you hit 40, between the career and the family, your baseline stress is already so much higher.
Exactly. It's the perfect storm. You layer the physical stress of a restrictive diet on top of that existing life stress, and the body just panics. And this is the analytical part that's so crucial. High cortisol is doing two things at once. It's breaking down your muscle tissue for quick energy, but then, and this is the heart-wrenching part, it's specifically signaling your body to store fat in the visceral area around the belly. You're essentially stressing your body into the exact shape you're trying to avoid. The diet itself actually recreates the problem you're trying to solve.
It's like we're entering the Hunger Games of weight loss here, especially once we hit 40. We really have to talk about leptin, that hormone produced by your fat cells that basically tells the brain, hey, we're good. We have enough energy stored up. You can stop eating now.
Exactly. It's the ultimate fuel gauge. But here's the thing. When you drop weight too quickly, your leptin levels don't just dip, they plummet, way faster than the actual fat loss occurs. Suddenly, your brain thinks you've hit 0% body fat and enters an emergency state. It triggers this overwhelming, primal hunger that's almost impossible to ignore. And I really want to emphasize this. It's not a lack of willpower. It's a neurochemical demand. Your brain is literally screaming that you're starving, which is why that rebound binge feels so inevitable with crash diets. It's biology, not a failure of character.
So while leptin is crashing, ghrelin, that hunger hormone, is just skyrocketing. It's what makes your stomach growl and sends you searching for anything calorie-dense. It's a lot to handle.
Exactly. And it's even more complex as we get older because our hormonal sensitivity actually shifts. When you finally eat after a crash diet, ghrelin doesn't just drop back down like it did when you were younger. You can finish a full meal and still feel that drive to keep eating. It's really a double whammy. Your body is acting like a biological rubber band, snapping back with a vengeance to force those fat stores to rebuild.
I really want to pivot to what I think is the most critical part of this, the sarcopenia trap. We know we naturally lose muscle as we age, but it's how rapid weight loss just accelerates that process that's so alarming.
It really is the hidden cost of those quick fixes. Think about it. If you lose 10 pounds on a crash diet, up to 40% of that can actually be lean muscle tissue. And that's a disaster, because muscle is your metabolic engine. It's what burns calories just by existing.
So by stripping away the muscle, you're essentially making your engine smaller.
Exactly. You're lowering your BMR, your basal metabolic rate. That's why the rebound happens. When you go back to eating normally, you're burning fewer calories at rest than when you started, so the fat comes back even faster. It's a heartbreaking cycle.
What's so tough about weight loss, especially once we hit 40, is this internal weight thermostat we all have. It's like our bodies have a memory of our highest weight and decide, okay, this is our safe zone.
Exactly.
and that's the metabolic set point. It's so interesting how the rebound happens. When you drop weight too fast, your body actually treats it like an emergency. It starts slowing down your thyroid and even makes you move less throughout the day, fidgeting less, without you even realizing it.
Right, so it's not just in your head. Your body is literally trying to save you.
Precisely. You basically become a Prius when you really want to be a Hummer. Your muscles get incredibly efficient at burning less fuel to do the same amount of work. It's a brilliant survival mechanism for a famine, but honestly, it's just a huge hurdle when you're trying to maintain health in a world where food is everywhere.
So it's a situation we see all the time. Someone finally hits that magic number on the scale they've been chasing, and they want to celebrate, but something feels off. They look in the mirror and see they're softer, they feel physically weaker, and they've essentially fallen into that skinny fat trap.
Right, and it's honestly heartbreaking because you've done the hard work, but your metabolic health is actually worse than when you started. By sacrificing muscle just to move the needle on the scale, you've shifted your body composition toward a higher fat percentage, which spikes insulin resistance and inflammation. You've basically aged your metabolism from the inside out. It's the definition of a Pyrrhic victory.
Let's talk about insulin for a second, because it's so misunderstood. It's fascinating how muscle tissue acts as the primary sink for blood glucose. When we lose that muscle, especially during those high-stress diets, we're essentially losing our best tool for clearing sugar from the blood, right?
Exactly. And that's why the metabolic rebound happens so fast. It's actually heartbreaking. You finish a diet with less muscle, you have a carbohydrate-heavy meal, but your body just doesn't have a place to store that energy anymore, so it shuttles it directly into fat. You're essentially primed for rapid gain. And since the rebound is almost exclusively fat, it just makes the next attempt even harder. It's a vicious cycle, but understanding that muscle-first perspective is how we finally break it.
So let's talk about the thyroid. It's essentially the master regulator of our entire metabolism, right? It's constantly monitoring how much energy we have available. But when that energy drops too low, well, T3 production just nosedives.
Exactly. And that's where it gets tricky, especially after 40, when the thyroid is already more sensitive. Severe caloric restriction basically signals the body to go into hibernation. You're feeling cold, you're exhausted, maybe even noticing your hair thinning. And that's not just a side effect, it's a physical metabolic break.
It's so interesting how the body tries to protect itself, but then there's that lag time when you actually try to go back to a normal routine.
That's the real kicker. Even once you start eating normally again, it can take weeks for the thyroid to wake up. So you're eating regular calories, but you're still burning them at that suppressed rate. That's exactly why that immediate weight regain, the rebound, happens. It's not a failure of will. It's just biology catching up.
You know, we really have to talk about the psychological toll here. When a crash diet fails after 40, it does more than just stall progress. It really erodes your self-efficacy. You start to believe your body is just fundamentally broken.
Right, and that creates this deep-seated fear of food. You end up oscillating between severe restriction and that really painful, guilt-ridden indulgence. It's so interesting how that stress then spikes cortisol, which actually perpetuates the physical problem you're trying to solve. That's why we have to move from eating to lose to eating to nourish. At the end of the day, you just can't hate your body into a version of yourself you'll finally love.
Okay, so if the old school crash dieting is off the table, especially once we hit 40, what's the actual path forward? What's the non-negotiable here?
It really starts and ends with protein. And it's so interesting how the rebound happens if we ignore this. Because after 40, we deal with something called anabolic resistance. Essentially, our muscles become a bit more stubborn. They're harder to stimulate than they used to be.
Right. They need a louder signal to stay healthy.
Exactly. That's why we actually need more protein as we age, not less, to trigger that muscle synthesis. You really want to aim for nearly a gram per pound of your ideal body weight. It's not just nutrition, it's a signal to your body that resources are plentiful. It's that metabolic anchor that protects your lean mass while the fat burns away, so you aren't just losing weight, you're staying strong.
I want to dig into the why behind the metabolic struggle after 40, because it's not just about willpower. You've mentioned that we have to get really specific about amino acids, specifically leucine. Why is that the master switch?
It's fascinating, really. Think of your muscle as a construction site. You can have all the bricks, those are your amino acids, but without a foreman to yell, "Start building," nothing happens. Leucine is that foreman.
Right, but the foreman doesn't stay the same as we age, does he?
That's exactly it. As we get older, the foreman gets a bit hard of hearing. It's what we call anabolic resistance. It's why a simple sandwich worked in your 20s, but now you need a megaphone to get a response. You really need to hit about 2.5 to 3 grams of leucine, usually 30 to 40 grams of high-quality protein, just to trigger that muscle-building signal. It's not that your body is broken, it just needs a much louder signal to stay metabolically healthy.
You know, we often think diet is the whole game, but it's really not enough on its own. It's so interesting how we prioritize cardio, but without actually lifting heavy things, we're missing that crucial signal to keep our muscle mass, right?
That's exactly why it matters. See, when you're in a calorie deficit, your body is essentially looking for fuel, and if you aren't challenging your muscles, it'll catabolize them for energy. But lifting sends a survival signal that says, we need this tissue to function. It's what shifts the weight loss from general tissue to actual adipose tissue. Honestly, it's the most potent anti-aging tool we have.
You know, it's a hard truth to accept, but we really have to change the goalpost here. Especially as we hit 40, it's not just about losing weight anymore. It's about changing your actual body composition.
Right. And that is such a massive mental hurdle for people. Because look, you might stay the exact same weight on that scale for 6 months, but if your waist is shrinking and your energy is skyrocketing, that's the real win. You're essentially trading fluff for density.
It's so interesting how the rebound happens when we don't realize that. A 150-pound person with high muscle mass functions on a completely different level than someone at the same weight with high fat mass.
Exactly. Muscle is just so much more compact. That's why I always say, throw the scale away if you have to. Use a tape measure. Look at how your clothes fit. That's how you actually track the metabolic shift.
You know, we really can't dive into hormones without talking about the reset button, sleep. It's that critical window where the body actually clears out metabolic waste and recalibrates everything from cortisol to growth hormone.
Exactly. And honestly, it's tough to see people over 40 working so hard, cutting calories, hitting the gym, but only getting 5 hours of rest. You're essentially spinning your wheels because sleep deprivation creates the exact same hormonal environment as a starvation response. Your cortisol spikes, ghrelin, your hunger hormone, goes through the roof, and your insulin sensitivity just tanks.
Right, so it's not just about feeling tired. It's a physiological roadblock.
It really is. That's why I tell my clients that prioritizing 7 to 8 hours isn't a luxury, it's a weight loss strategy. It's during that deep sleep phase that your body finally taps into fat stores for the energy it needs to repair itself. It's such a game changer.
We touched on cortisol earlier, but I think it's crucial to realize that active stress management isn't just a nice to have, it's a pillar. You really can't white-knuckle your way through this kind of metabolic shift, especially after 40.
Exactly. And I think people often dismiss things like deep breathing or a walk in nature as woo-woo, but they're actually direct metabolic interventions. It's all about signaling safety. See, when the body feels safe, it's willing to release weight, but if it feels threatened, it hoards. Honestly, taking 10 minutes for active relaxation can be far more effective for your metabolism than cutting another 100 calories.
I want to pivot to hydration for a second, because it's so easy to overlook as we get older. It's actually a bit of a biological trap. Our thirst mechanism starts to blunt, similar to that protein threshold we discussed. We end up reaching for a snack because we genuinely think we're hungry, when our body is really just crying out for water.
And that's exactly why it's so frustrating for people. And from a purely analytical level, if you're trying to lose weight, dehydration is a deal breaker. Lipolysis, the actual process of breaking down fat, is a hydrolysis reaction. You literally need water molecules to burn fat. If you're dry, your metabolism just stalls.
Right. It's like trying to run a machine without the essential coolant. And I imagine that ripple effect hits our workouts too.
Oh, absolutely. Staying hydrated is what keeps your joints lubricated and your muscles firing correctly so you can actually train hard enough to see results. My big tip, keep it consistent and don't forget electrolytes, especially if you're eating clean because you'll flush those minerals out faster. Honestly, it's the simplest metabolic upgrade you can possibly make.
I think this is probably the hardest pill to swallow for most of us, but we really have to talk about patience. Especially after 40, that idea of rapid weight loss being the goal, it's really a myth, isn't it?
It really is. And it's so interesting how the metabolic rebound happens when we try to force it. You almost have to shift your perspective from a 12-week sprint to a 12-month journey. By aiming for that slow, steady 0.5% of body weight per week, you're essentially bypassing the body's internal alarm systems. That's exactly why muscle mass matters here. It keeps your metabolism high and honestly, keeps your sanity intact. At the end of the day, slow progress is sticky progress. Fast progress is almost always fleeting.
To wrap this up, I think the biggest takeaway today is that your body isn't actually working against you. It's working to save you. It's just using a survival script that we need to learn how to read.
Exactly. That metabolic rebound people hit after 40, it's not inevitable. It's really just a symptom of using a strategy that doesn't respect your physiology anymore. When you focus on protein and heavy lifting, you're finally working with your biology instead of fighting it.
It's so interesting how that shift happens. You really can be leaner and stronger at 50 than you were at 30. But like you said, you just have to be a bit smarter about the input.
Right. Change the input, and you change the outcome. It's about patience over punishment. We'd love to hear from you guys, though. Have you dealt with that rebound effect after a crash diet? Share your wins or your struggles in the comments below.